Well, good afternoon, and welcome. My name is Tom Banchoff. It's good to see some familiar faces, some new faces. I'm director of the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs here at Georgetown, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our presentation and discussion on the topic, The Other 9/11, Faith, Hope, and the Media with Simon Cohen, who I will introduce in just a second. We gather today, of course, on a terrible day in American and global history. It's a solemn anniversary, an opportunity to remember and honor the victims of the attacks in New York and, of course, here in Washington. One way to honor them, just one way, here in a university setting, is to reflect together on how we can build a more peaceful world into the future. Now, of course, that involves security measures, that involves deterring and disarming violent extremists. But I hope you'll agree with me, it also involves positive efforts to further intercultural and interreligious understanding over time. And through its programs, the programs of the Berkeley Center, I hope you've had a chance to learn a bit more. We've got some material out on the table. We encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. Through its programs, Georgetown and the Berkeley Center seek to contribute in a modest way to those efforts to furthering interfaith dialogue, interfaith understanding. And we're really part of a broader constellation, a growing constellation of organizations, local, national, and international, engaged in these efforts. We're very fortunate today to have a leader of one of those organizations, Simon Cohen, with us to share some of his reflections. Simon is founder and managing director of Global Tolerance, a leading communications organization based in London, really a pioneer in the study of faith as it intersects with media issues and questions of intercultural and interreligious understanding. In particular, and he'll talk about this a bit in his opening remarks, he's a pioneer in efforts to generate positive news coverage of faith and interfaith stories in national, local, and also international media. And I think we can all agree there's not enough of that positive coverage out there. Simon has worked with a long list of distinguished clients. I'll just mention a few: the Dalai Lama, the Prince of Wales. He's run workshops and appeared as a speaker at numerous international symposia, including the Parliament of the World's Religions and the World Economic Forum, where we had a chance to meet earlier this year. In 2009, PRWeek, a magazine based in the UK, recognized Simon as one of the most influential PR professionals in the country. Today, Simon, you'll be sharing some of your thoughts with us on faith and the media in our globalizing world and its potential to increase and further intercultural understanding. And in particular, we look forward to your reflections on the other 9/11, September 11th, 1906, when Gandhi initiated his campaign of nonviolent resistance. We've agreed that you'll speak for maybe 35, 40 minutes, which will allow us plenty of time for discussion. So with that, please join me in welcoming Simon Cohen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I think it would be an appropriate start if we just had a minute or so of silence to remember and respect those people who lost their lives on 9/11. Thank you. The natal government, the natal parliament in South Africa, had imposed all kinds of volatile, virulent acts against Indians in South Africa. But the Asiatic Law Amendment Ordinance of 1906 was particularly preposterous. It reduced Indians to semi-criminal status. Every single Indian aged 8 or over would need to get their hands fingerprinted with the Office of Registrars. If they didn't, then the Indians, when confronted by the police, could get arrested, fined, chucked in prison. So Mahatma Gandhi called a meeting. And I'd like to take you on a little journey today. And that journey starts here, in the Empire Theatre in Farrier Street in Johannesburg, the scene for this fateful meeting in 1906, September the 11th, 1906. In that meeting, Gandhi had called people to respond to this despicable, impending law. It was then when a Muslim, Sheikh Habib, sprung to his feet and he said, "As God is witness," he would not succumb to this cowardly law. What was Gandhi to do? You see, this changed everything for Gandhi. This had moved things from the term that he borrowed from Thoreau of civil disobedience to something more. Gandhi was no stranger to the significance of evoking God in a political struggle through his own spiritual development. He knew what this meant. He knew that he had a choice to stay along the civil disobedience route and the pledge route, or move to this new arena, that of a religious vow. In Gandhi's words, there is only one course open for those like me: to die, but not to obey the law. To die, but not to obey the law. But what was everyone else going to do? There were 3,000 Transvaal Indians here, Hindus and Muslims. And it wasn't Gandhi's style to coerce people to his way of thinking. That just wasn't his style. No, if needs be, he'd educate and talk to them one by one if necessary. What happened? Well, he explained to everyone their responsibilities, the potential implications of breaking the law. And every single person in that room, one by one by one, considered their responsibilities, stood up, and made an oath with God that they would not succumb to this cowardly law, the Asiatic Law Amendment Ordinance. Gandhi recalled in a letter 20 years later, "I can never forget the scene that is present before my mind's eye as I write. The community's enthusiasm knew no bounds." That, ladies and gentlemen, was the birth of Satyagraha, the force which is born out of truth and love or non-violence. September the 11th, 1906. And it was this same force, this non-violent force, this soul force, which inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who actually used the word soul force in his "I Have a Dream" speech. It inspired him to fight, to champion the civil rights movement in the US. As he said, Christ supplied the spirit, Gandhi supplied the method. It was the same soul force that inspired Nelson Mandela to fight apartheid in South Africa. It was the same soul force that helped bring down the Berlin Wall without blood being shed. It was the same soul force that, according to scholars, helped free 3.3 billion people, over half the world's population, in the last 100 years. Now, that's a pretty good global news story worth spreading. All started, Chef Haji Habib sparked the crisis in Gandhi, 9/11/1906. So where do we go from Mr. Mandela and the Berlin Wall? The media's the most powerful entity on earth. It has the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. They were Malcolm X's words in the 1960s. 1960s! I mean, I may be older than I look, which is about 14. I appreciate that. I'm 16 and a half. But the media is the most powerful entity on earth. How much has the media changed in the last 40, 50 years or so? Let's think about the computers and the birth of the internet, Twitter. Now, with that increased power comes increased responsibility. With any power comes responsibility. And there have been certain sections of the media with reports of Muslim terrorists following the attack of 9/11, with repeated images over and 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 over again of planes crashing into Twin Towers, leaving us feel helpless, hopeless, insecure, and scared. So what is the media's responsibility? It's certainly not to say that the world's full of smiling people, bunny rabbits bouncing everywhere, and children holding hands, skipping along green pastures. No, it's to report, to reflect the community they serve. But in a post-9/11 era, the media's got a responsibility to have some degree of knowledge about the issues that they reflect. So the media has a responsibility to improve its faith literacy as it covers this most sensitive and resonating subject. Because what happens when we hear Muslim terrorist or other such media shorthand? It puts barriers, invisible barriers nevertheless, but barriers between us. We think of the other rather than brother. It dehumanizes, because it goes very well with the media paradigm to have the other, the enemy, black and white rather than shades of grey. In a post-9/11 era, I would suggest that the media has a responsibility to humanize, not to dehumanize. Now, what does humanizing mean? What does humanizing mean? Surely the media is an industry. It's got a responsibility to make money, supply and demand. Well, okay, is the media making money through the 9/11 rather than the other 9/11 paradigm of communications? I saw some statistics that out of 395 US newspapers, there was an average of 7.09% fall in circulation. 7.09% across all US newspapers. So much for good news not selling. So what if, through a humanizing paradigm of the media, showing the balance in those shades of grey, it could actually help make the media money? Because the media isn't there for social marketing. The media is driven by market forces. So where is the hope that we can empower the media to live up to its responsibility that comes with its unrivaled power? Well, a good place to look is France, just as an example. There's a newspaper called Us France. It's the largest circulating newspaper in the whole of France, and it's a regional paper. It's the only paper whose readership is rising. Why? What's going on here? Globally, not just in the US, circulations are falling. Yes, admittedly, we're in the middle of a recession, but so's Us France. And when you look at circulation's 5-year, 10-year trend, still falling. No recession then. What's going on? Us France has very strict ethical editorial guidelines. Please excuse my French pronunciation, by the way, for anyone who's a linguist. It means West France. That's what I'm trying to say, very badly. Us France will never show human suffering. They will never show corpses. They will never show someone in handcuffs that impinges on the integrity and the dignity of any human being. That's not to say that they don't tackle hard news and don't provide balance. Of course they do. Strict ethical editorial policies. What Jans Christian Smuts, Gandhi's great opponent, once said of Gandhi was that the human touch, the human spirit, was never absent. So a humanizing media, one that upholds the dignity and integrity of every human being, can actually make money. There's another example, also in France. Reporter d'Espoir, again, please excuse my pronunciation. Reporters of Hope, a relatively new news agency, which, as the name suggests, covers articles that empower, humanize, articles of human hope. I met someone from there in Paris a few months ago, and he told me that they ran a supplement of hope around on a Christmas day with the largest national newspaper in France. Year-on-year circulations went up 23%. So it seems that there's some kind of yearning for positivity, for faith. So a more Gandhian media, perhaps that's what's needed. What does a Gandhian media look like? What does a non-violent media look like? Well, it has this human touch. But with Gandhi, my understanding of it anyway, and it's a lifelong study, or at least it will be, is that Gandhi didn't hate or fight the people. He fought for the injustice. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I will not hate you, but I will not obey your unjust laws." Don't hate the people, you hate the injustice. What would a Gandhian media on that premise look like? Rather than Muslims, Jews, Christians, things that, or labels that strip us of our humanity, we recognize the interdependence between us all, and we concentrate on the news angles of the injustice. Does anyone know who the most famous journalist in the world is? Ever? Could I have some suggestions as to who that might be? Yeah. Walter Cronkite is a good guess. Not quite. He's up there, though. Any other suggestions? Got Walter Cronkite in the front. Yeah? Okay. It's also up there, but not the number one spot. One last guess. Tom Freeman. No, it's this guy. Superman. Why, of all of the professions that Superman could pick, would he choose to be a journalist? The fight for truth and justice. Not fighting the people, fighting the injustice. A Gandhian media. Why is this relevant to us all? Well, for one thing, it's very easy to blame the media and play the blame game, isn't it? It removes any personal or professional responsibility we might have. The media, they're always getting it wrong. But the media landscape's changed so much. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. 200 million YouTube videos, 20 hours worth of YouTube video footage uploaded every single minute, a new blog every single second. 4.1 billion of us pay to use a mobile phone out of 6.7 billion population. 4.1 billion. Wow. What does that tell us? It tells us that at least 6 out of 10 of us are media owners. And I could quite easily, and I hope quite convincingly, say that even without a mobile phone, with this, with your gob, you're a media owner as well. Gandhi knew the power of word of mouth. He also incidentally knew the power of the traditional media, having set up Indian Opinion and several other newspapers as the communications channels for his movement. But 4.1 billion of us texting away, tweeting, texting. What does this mean? It means that we have an opportunity to be the media we want to see in the world. That sounds like a soundbite, doesn't it? What does that mean? Be the media you want to see in the world. It means that rather than complaining about the media and it strips us and it takes away our identity, our integrity, how are we texting? How are we communicating with each other? The social media revolution is significant. I mentioned some numbers before. One of the wonderful sources of hope, and let's not forget that on such a day, a sensitive day, and a day of remembrance, where is this source of hope? One of the sources of hope is that the juxtaposition between social media and faith is news in itself. How many, for example, Twitter articles have you seen in the newspaper only today or yesterday or the day before? Twitter makes news. What does that mean for us? Well, I've been privileged to work with some fantastic NGOs, religious leaders, interfaith groups, who constantly bemoan that there's a lack of religious affairs space for programs and for articles and no religious affairs correspondence. And what are we to do? And we're always on page 56, right in the corner. What about the front page stuff? Twitter's not on page 56 in the corner. So what we have an opportunity for is that rather than compete with a lot of faith stories, we can begin to give a creative spin on a traditional technology media story. So let me give you an example. Global Tolerance created Faithbook on Facebook. There was a lot of media coverage about Facebook in the media, so we created Faithbook, social networking for people of different faiths. The Bali bomber, in his interpretation of jihad, said that the next jihad would be waged on the web. So part of the reason for setting up Faithbook was to tackle this, to confront this extremism on the web, and provide an opportunity, a platform for people of faith to discuss issues that were important to them. So it's got about 2,500 or so fans. Not bad, not great, could be better, maybe a C. But because Faithbook itself, this juxtaposition between faith and social media is news, and because we had the media literacy to know that it was news and how to utilize the media, the story of Faithbook went all over the world, reached hundreds of millions of people. We did a Faithbook poll on how people of faith were responding to the global recession. Suddenly you were finding religious media coverage on the financial pages, on the front pages of newspapers around the world. So this is a source of hope, that what lies in here is extraordinary. I don't know a single person's faith that is ordinary. Do you know an ordinary faith? It's kind of nonsensical in my mind. And seeing as the media reports that which is out of the ordinary, it bodes well for faith communities. And the media landscape has changed completely. Because beforehand, when newspapers and the traditional media were gatekeepers to our perceptions about faith and religion and society, it's not like that anymore. We are the gatekeepers. There's a newspaper in the UK called the Daily Mail. There's been a lot of coverage, which I've been following with interest, about the health service over here. And I know that the NHS over in the UK has been the subject at one time. Anyway, in the Daily Mail was a poll online, a very, how can you say, charged poll question, which said, should gypsies be allowed to queue jump at doctors? Yes or no? Nothing like objective or humanizing media, is there? Should gypsies be allowed to queue jump? So we in the Twitter sphere, excuse the weird language, but we were pretty disgusted by this. And so we did a little campaign to vote yes. Because the Daily Mail were obviously after all of their readers to say, no, absolutely, it's a disgrace. What, gypsies queue jumping? Our health service, how dare they? So we said yes. Within a couple of hours, 92% of respondents had said yes on the Daily Mail poll. Got a great snapshot of the Daily Mail poll saying that 92% of Daily Mail readers thought that, yes, gypsies should, in fact, queue jump. They had to take it down online, offline, completely took it down. And this is the world in which we're living in now, where we can directly influence the media agenda about health, about faith, across the spectrum of the social sphere. But just because we've got this power, how do we use this power? How do we use it responsibly? I just like that image. This was my best friend at university. He sadly passed away last year, Gib. And he was diagnosed, I mean, he had about 10 years or so he had a bad decade, a really bad decade. He had a bit of a nervous breakdown. He had all kinds of things happen. And to top things off, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I was able to see him at the hospice about 2 days before he passed away. Taking that train journey to see someone, knowing that it's going to be the last time that you see them, is a very interesting kind of spiritual experience. And when I got to the hospice, his hair was all shaved and he couldn't really speak, but when we looked into each other's eyes, it was still my best friend. And I still feel his presence now. Why am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you because I firmly, passionately believe that one of the ways in which whether or not we believe in anything, and I think that in some way we all do, that in the Gandhian spirit of being prepared to suffer, of making yourself vulnerable, of putting yourself out there for something greater than yourself, you have the greatest capacity to affect social change. So one of the sources of hope, one of the many sources of hope, is what lies in here. And before we tweet, before we text, before we surf the net, before we use the media, be it traditional or modern media, if we ask ourselves this question of how much of this are we willing to share, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. If I didn't speak to you today from the heart, go away, okay, nice lecture, maybe not a nice lecture, whatever, doesn't mean anything. I'm speaking to you right from here about this guy, and it pains me every time I look at that picture. Quite weirdly, I now live half a mile down the road, and that's a whole weird serendipity. The degree to which we're willing to share. And this is, I think, one of the lessons that I can learn from Satyagraha, that the willingness to open our hearts and share with the media, be it with your mobile phone, be it whatever, the more that we communicate from the heart and not from the head, the more we can be the media, the humanizing media we want to see in the world. With Gandhi, the human spirit was never absent. That was his opponent that said that. His opponent. It allowed for a decent peace, he said. Reconciliation and justice. And that's what Satyagraha was about, where you can actually make friends with your opponents. You can come to an understanding because you're not fighting each other, you're fighting the injustice. This guy is a complete dude. He's a 25-year-old living Buddha. He's His Holiness Karmapa Thaya Dorje. He's the disputed head of the Karma Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. So if and when the Dalai Lama retires, it will be this guy or another guy, Urgyen Trinley, who's the next regent of Tibet, the next head of Tibet. And just to give you some understanding of the context, blood has been spilt on the streets as far as this rift in Tibetan Buddhism is concerned. I mean, it's not very Buddhist, the whole notion. There's been high court cases going on, and are still going on, over the Rumtek monastery and who owns the right to the black hat crown. Quite dehumanizing. And so when Karmapa Thaya Dorje was coming to the UK for the very first time, Global Tolerance and me at the head of it, I received hate mail from people saying, you're representing this pretend Karmapa. What do you think you're doing? You're driving division. He's an imposter. Well, he's a really lovely, lovely man. And when you're standing next to him, he's one of those people with that presence where you just think, you don't need to speak. You're just amazing. But we knew that there were a lot of risks. And there are many risks when you're communicating faith in the media. And we need to empower ourselves with the media literacy, the journalist's mindset as to what those risks might be. And we knew that one of the risks were going to be that the people writing the letters and other people within the media would label him as such and such, give him labels, imposter and other things, dehumanizing, labeling, categorizing. So as a communication strategy, we recommended that he set up a MySpace page, an opportunity for people to see what's in here, what was behind the label of being an incarnation of the Buddha, of being a spiritual leader. What was in here? So there were pictures, and there are pictures of his family, of him growing up, of his interests, his passions, his hobbies. You try and dehumanize that. You can't because he liked the Black Eyed Peas. And you know what? I like the Black Eyed Peas as well. And that common ground, that interest, is what builds bridges between faith and secular society. What's in here? What other lessons, other than this humanizing force, can we take from the other 9/11, 1906, the birth of the modern nonviolent movement? Well, one of them is to strategize. The media isn't a game. It, to use Malcolm X's words again, is the most powerful entity on earth. And we need to be literate in it, or we need to work with people who are literate in it. Just in the same way that interfaith relations cannot be successful without a foundation of understanding of the other person's faith, so too can media relations never be successful without a foundation of understanding of what a copy deadline is, what the journalist's pressures are, and how the media works. So we need to empower ourselves, and we need to strategize. And part of that strategy is creativity. In 1893, when Gandhi arrived in South Africa, you'll all be aware, I'm sure, of the story of him getting kicked out the train between Durban and Pretoria in the mountains, freezing cold. And it was then, he called that the most creative night of my life. Why was it the most creative night of his life? Well, before him, he had two instincts, two impulses, two reactions, fight or flight. He could use his status as a lawyer to complain. He had a ticket, that's not right. Or he could just leave it. But he chose not to follow those impulses and to channel those feelings into a much more creative space. Not fight the people, the person who chucked him off the plane, fight the injustice, the big idea, the creative idea. On the 100-year anniversary of Satyagraha, we were working with St Ethelburgers, which is a centre for reconciliation and peace in central London. A remarkable place. They've got a custom-made Bedouin tent in the heart of the square mile in the city. And they wanted to increase the awareness of their work in reconciliation and peace. So, with a bit of persuasion, we borrowed the Mahatma Gandhi wax figure from Madame Tussauds. This was no easy task. I mean, the guy had 3 bodyguards. 3 bodyguards and a makeup artist. No offense, Tom, but where are my bodyguards? But seriously, 3 bodyguards, a makeup artist, well, it's £250,000 to buy one of these things. And we had 100 people, including this beautiful young lady, posing for peace on 9/11 to mark the 100-year anniversary of Satyagraha, using the creative force, international media coverage. This gentleman is Raj Mohan Gandhi, one of the Mahatma's grandchildren, a fine man, a former senator, journalist, civil rights champion. Great man. We worked with him when he was in the aftermath of 7/7, when he came to speak about Islam and terror. He's a very interesting man, a really interesting man. Yeah, I remember him telling me about how Mahatma used to refer to his grandchildren as his walking sticks. I can just imagine sort of going around like that with his grandchildren. Lovely. But I'm getting off point. A Hindu talking about Islam and terror. One of the principles that we can learn from Gandhi and the other 9/11 is to speak up and speak out for your brother from another mother. So speak out for each other. A Muslim speaking out about condemning violence in the aftermath of 7/7, 9/11, Madrid, or other disasters, absolutely continue to do that. It would be appropriate. It would be inappropriate not to do that. But it's a little bit like advertising. You're bound to say that. You're biased. When we speak out for each other, not only do we have the third-party credibility, which is central to the world of public relations and communications, which is the world that Global Tolerance operates in. Not only do you help the other person's cause, but you also increase the currency and credibility of your own activities, of your own beliefs. When Raj Mohan Gandhi was speaking about the peace-loving nature of Islam in the aftermath of 7/7, he didn't just help the plight of Muslims who felt the pain and felt demonized in the media, demonized in society. He also got a big gold star next to Hinduism and his culture and his faith. So speaking up and for each other in the spirit of interreligious harmony, which I see as part of the spirit of Georgetown, thank goodness, is another central part of the lesson. Another one is using Twitter. What else can we do? What practically things can we do to restore some hope? In the run-up to this talk, I recognise that the other 9/11, I'm neither Hindu nor Muslim. I kind of don't fit in any of those categories. The fact that it was on September the 11th, that this had some news currency, this event today, and there was some coverage in the Washington Post and Washington Times, and on Twitter, I've been using this hashtag, the other 9/11, and some of my followers, whatever that means, and friends and colleagues have also been using this hashtag. Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I'm saying using a hashtag? No. It's using a tool so that when people search for terms, they're more easily found. And now I know you haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. We'll talk after. So we used the hashtag the other 9/11, and there have been quite a few people using this hashtag the other 9/11 in their tweets. Now, if each and every one of you could have a show of hands, who's on Twitter? Who's on Twitter? Okay, well, good. Probably about half there. If each and every one of us, when we leave this hall, was to tweet something about the other 9/11 and use that hashtag and ask 2, 3 people or others to retweet, to use that hashtag as well, it's probably very likely that the other 9/11 would become what's called a trend topic. What happens when it becomes a trend topic? It happens on twitter.com. It shows up. What happens when it's on twitter.com and other tools? Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people get to learn about the inspirational story of Gandhi as Satyagraha, the force which is born of love and truth and non-violence on 9/11. So we see with the whole new social media landscape that it's futile to start or continue to blame the media. Yes, the media and certain segments of the media need to improve their faith literacy and engage with some of these issues further. But each and every one of us are media owners. Working with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Board of World Religious Leaders in Amritsar in India, the Golden Temple, was a humbling but extremely stressful experience. I think I've got about 12, and I am counting grey hairs on my head, and I'm sure they weren't there before this experience. Just to give you some context, around the Golden Temple you can't wear any shoes or socks at all. And so with this media scrum that's going around there, I was the only person from Global Tolerance there. And with anyone who's had any experiences of the Indian media, concepts such as personal space don't really resonate as they do where I come from. It was a remarkable conference, and to prove that I'm no superhero and we've all got a lot to do, there was a talk that the Dalai Lama gave when all the cameras were turned off inside this conference. He did a half-an-hour talk on where we come from, where we're going, and the meaning of life. Wow. He was amazing, absolutely amazing. And halfway through the talk, he stopped and he'd just sit there giggling to himself. He just giggled for about a minute because he was so overwhelmed with his own spirit. What a cool guy. I was just, wow, sucking it in. Brilliant. Now, I had to go to the airport. It was the end of that marked the end of the conference, and Chief Rabbi in the UK, Sir Jonathan Sachs, he unfortunately had to miss that lecture because he was packing his bags. And we were in a tuk-tuk together. And I said, oh, Chief Rabbi, it was an amazing conference, talk. The Dalai Lama spoke for half an hour on where we come from, where we're going, and the meaning of life. It was amazing. Really, Simon? Would you mind summarizing? Couldn't do it. And I didn't capture it. I didn't film it. So one of the lessons that we can learn is to capture the extraordinary acts, beliefs, activities of humanity that lie within each and every one of us. And by doing so, we can be the media we wish to see in the world. We can ensure that the spirit of humanity is never absent in a post-9/11 media. Thank you very much for listening today, and I'd be very interested to continue this further.